Do you own a seven-figure practice? You've probably heard me talk a lot about the Seven Figure Practice Club recently. This is a new, amazing program where we are getting together seven-figure practice owners together in a small group of 12 to work together for a year. There's so many things that seven-figure practice owners deal with that they don't have a community to ask questions, learn, and grow from. If you want to apply to be in the Seven Figure Practice Club, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/club. There, you're going to be able to read all about what the program entails. We're going to be covering all sorts of things in our monthly meetings. We're meeting twice a month. The first meeting is 90 minutes, and we're going to have three 25-minute hot seats for you to dig in and to get questions answered, and also to help other seven figure practice owners. The second meeting of the month is going to be one of our practice owners presenting on something they are knocking out of the park. And it's a chance to really be able to learn, teach, grow from each other in a way that you really don't find anywhere else in the marketplace. Also, in person meetings are so important. And that's why twice a year, we're going to connect once here in Traverse City, Michigan, and then another time somewhere else, yet to be determined. And we're going to connect, we're going to hang out, we're going to talk private practice, but we're also going to have a lot of fun. So if you want to apply for the Seven Figure Practice Club, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/club and fill out your application today. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 937. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am so excited that you are here with us today. You know, we have been covering so many things with seven-figure practices, and just a reminder, we have opened up the application for our seven-figure practice club. That is our brand new membership community, only 12 people coming into that, and the applications are open until the end of January. So you can read more over at practiceofthepractice.com/club if you are a seven-figure practice owner and you are looking for more community. You know, honestly, I'm going to just jump right into it to make sure that we have enough time hanging out today with Lee Benson. And Lee has exited his company at 9 figures. He's on a mission to help entrepreneurs win. He has a book called Your Most Important Number, which we are going to dig into today. But even more awesome is that he has a new book about kids and raising kids, and I can't wait to talk about that as well. Lee, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Joe, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to shorten my intro so we had maximum time to hang out today. So you've got this new book that came out. Tell us the name of the book, and it's about kids, and would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the book title is Value Creation Kid, and the subtitle, very important, is The Healthy Struggles Your Children Need to Succeed. And I've been spending a lot of time here on this seventh company that I've started from scratch, operationalizing value creation within organizations of any type or size, whether it's one employee startup all the way to $60+ billion market cap public companies. And the goal there really is connecting culture to value creation. And then I started thinking about it. Yeah, how do we do this within families? And more specifically, it should be all families, but more specifically, the middle and low income families. What would resonate? What would work? How do we create this environment from which kids learn what their value creation superpowers are? And when we talk about value creation in this book, and my co-author, his name is Scott Donnell, we think about holistic value creation. So it's material value creation, it's emotional energy value creation, and it's spiritual value creation. And everybody plays in all three buckets. So how do we create a way to operationalize it? And we call it the gravy stack method. It's value creation, it's house rules, what's your job for the family, what are the expectations, how do you earn extra money? It's also financial competency, so you can be a self-reliant adult someday. And fourth, and very important, is healthy struggle. And counterintuitively, so many parents are taking struggle away from the kids. By the time they're an adult, they're not ready. They need another 8+ years to figure out how to be self-reliant and critical thinking, value creating adults. So the book is really a passion project, and Scott and I want to have it in at least 1 million families running with this within the next 5 years.
Mm. You know, it brings up a couple things for me. One thing I'm thinking is I forgot what book I read it in, but it was talking about the Great Barrier Reef and how the spots that flourish the most aren't the spots that are kind of stagnant and easy, like things just kind of die there. And it's not the spots of the Great Barrier Reef that just get pounded over and over. Like that's just too tough. But finding that kind of just appropriate level of grit, of struggle. That's something I try to keep in mind with my kids, where it's like, sure, I could grab the thing that you just threw in the microwave for you, or like you could do it yourself and start to do some of those things around the house more and more. And just finding that appropriate level of struggle and of figuring that out to me, it seems like it's always a balancing act. It also brought up another story where I was walking with a friend of mine about a year ago, and most of my audience knows my story, but Lee, you don't. During the pandemic, I took my kids on the road, and we lived in a camper, and went in national parks and pretty much quarantined just on the road for 9 months.
Mm.
And it was an amazing thing that we had planned as a family even before the pandemic. But in the process of that, their mom decided she wanted to leave the family and also like leave the kids. And so to have this unexpected uncoupling, but then also to be an unexpected single father and to deal with the grief that they go through. I
Mm.
was walking with my friend, and he just said how much he feels like he wishes his kids had more grief and loss and struggle, and not that he would ever wish what happened to me onto his own children, but to just as he hears about some things that my kids think through and do, in some ways it is a gift that they've had to experience a lot of the unfortunate side of life earlier on in life, and then still have a supportive father and supportive community and friends and all sorts of my family members around them. But when I say those things, how does that pair up to your book? How does that, like, what lessons would you encourage me as a dad raising two daughters? Any things that I should take away that you could give me?
Well, the first part is work backwards from what you think a graduating high school senior into adulthood would look like, for your two daughters. Simply, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, but I think about it. Wouldn't it be cool if every kid launching into adulthood out of high school, they were self-reliant, financially competent, financially independent if they chose to be? I was actually kicked out of my house at the beginning of my senior year, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, one of the
Mm,
best things for sure. But they can think critically, they understand the value of family and community, and they create value in the world in a win-win way. I mean, I love that general direction. So when you work backwards from that, what are the things that your daughters or any children need to be going through to make it happen? And in the book we call it the value creation cycle. So you struggle to get a capability, and then that capability builds internal confidence. Don't stop there, use it to create value, and then just keep going. And each time, if you want, you can take a bigger and bigger step around it. And when people ask me, hey Lee, where did you get your start into business, and they're looking for some cool story, and I said, well, really, it was pulling weeds for 25 cents an hour in the late 1960s. Because back then, 25 cents, you could buy two candy bars and have change. And then I thought, well, this is really cool. It's a lot of work for an hour. And now I could shovel snow, and I fourfolded what I made an hour. And then I could mow lawns, and I had a paper out. Then I had four paper outs, and it was restaurant work. And then in the 80s, it was a rock and roll band. I made most of my money there, playing over 1,000 nights out in clubs and concerts. And then my first business was early 90s, and I just kept building from there. But it was this value creation sort of struggle cycle, if you will. And I got to a place where I actually, and I feel that way today, when it's the harder it is, I start feeling warm inside, knowing it's going to be amazing when I come out the other side. So I trust the struggle. I think the biggest thing here, Joe, is to kind of work backwards from what kind of adult do we want, and
mm,
and to sort of cultivate. And the purpose of an education is to create value in the world. It's not get a good grade, get a diploma, get a degree, get a job. In that environment, the vast majority of kids are just doing what they think they're supposed to do instead of discovering what they're meant to do. And if we start having conversations around value creation in those three macro buckets, the material, emotional, and spiritual, uh, it's let's create an environment in the household where kids can discover their value creation superpower. And then what's the return on that investment going to be when they become adults? Huge in
mm.
so many ways.
Yeah, I went through an exercise similar to that where, the average, kid, when they say, here's what I really took from childhood, is going to have three, maybe five big core things that they're like, my dad taught me this. And,
Mhm.
and to me, when I think about the similar exercises to what you're saying, like I want my kids to be able to talk to anybody. And so then it becomes our daily decisions. For me, it's valuable to be able to see anybody as a human, to be able to talk to anybody, to dig into it, and to encourage my kids to make their own orders at a restaurant instead of my 9-year-old who's often shy around that, and just working through how do you do that, and how do we take steps in that direction, and now to see them when they're around adults, they're getting to the point where they can just be like, how was your day, and have conversations. So I love that.
So,
um,
Jesse, think about that. That is a perfect example of a healthy struggle for a child. And so, as you're designing this little, struggle gym, if you will, you get up in the morning, you go through these struggles, and you're working out and developing these capabilities. That's a perfect example. Now, just start stacking those over time, and it's amazing the difference. And it's resonating with kids as young as 5, 6 years old, having these conversations. I just love it.
yeah. Um, I'd love to kind of transition a little bit into kind of business. So this series that we're doing right now, the Seven Figure Practice series, up until now has been entirely seven figure practice owners. But as I read your bio, as I looked at your website, as I talked to you before we even got started, I was kind of sorting through like, does this make more sense to be part of our New Year, New Habits series, our Seven Figure Practice series, or kind of after that? But really, I think that knowing your most important number, and I want to dig into that, to me is such a great first line for just understanding what you're doing in your business. And so I decided I'm putting you into the seven figure practice series, even though you don't own a counseling business, but your principles definitely are going to be able to help seven figure practice owners. So first, let's just dig into what is your most important number.
The book outlines a methodology that's really sort of something I developed over my 40-year overnight success story, which is how do we get every single team member to fully align to creating the most value possible? And when I started, I had 3 employees in a company that went to 500 plus employees, sold it for 9 figures in 2016. But along the way, and including today, there's been 7 companies in total, and some of the exits were just a few $1 million. But it's been really good. And what I learned is that if we can get every single team member, even the solopreneur, because I work with a lot of startups, to think through the lens of every decision and every action is about creating the most value for what I'm trying to do. And in a for profit company, usually it's something around what's left over. And the most important number, every organization, again, whether you're a sole practitioner or any size, will have one number that reflects the value of the organization. And I believe the job of somebody that owns a company is to continually increase the value of that business. And so there'll be one number that reflects that. It could be cash flow, it could be profitability. I think in your case for practices, it's probably about what's left over or profitability, and it will drive the majority of the right behaviors. So what are we trying to accomplish? How do we create value? Maybe you want to have the best practice as a sole practitioner that you can. And, I know I can go out and easily sell over $1 million worth of my consulting time and not even work more than a week and a half a month. So how do you build in that direction? Or maybe you want to scale it. You add a few folks to the practice. Maybe you go to 2 or 3 markets. Maybe you want to be in 50 markets. Maybe you want to be globally someday. But if every decision and every action is through how are we continually increasing the overall value of this organization and the value we create for all stakeholders, um, that's what this book is really all about. Making that happen. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah. So it sounds like it's not that here's the one number, client satisfaction, or here's the one number,
Mhm.
profitability. It's going through a process of discovering what is your personal most important number. Is that true?
Yeah, for the organization. So if you have a practice, it's going to be about what's left over. It's important to have as much left over as possible, as long as you're creating real value for your clients. So you're more stable. You can weather downturns and all of that. And one of the things that I notice with leadership teams or really companies of all sizes is that they do so many different things. But when you really analyze what drives the majority of the value in the company that they have, even the biggest clients I have, one is currently about $60 billion in value. There's only four things that drive 90% of the total value of the entire organization. Yet when I got involved with them January of this year to help them execute on strategy, what was refine and execute, they had over 100 strategic initiatives. Now we're down to the four things that drive the value, and everything we're doing is something significantly different enough to create a better result in the future around those four things. Well, the same thing for a private practice. What are the things that you do that drive the majority of the value? I mean, there's how you get the right clients. I don't think there's any end to improving the quality of qualified clients that would come in. And then there's the work that you do, the experience that you do, and being able to get compensated for the actual value you bring. And so, what would be the couple of drivers of the that create the most value, and how do you do that as well as you can possibly think of doing before you jump to anything else and start adding to it? And as soon as companies do that, again, of any size, it's amazing how fast the results significantly improve. Does that resonate, Joe? I mean, this is a great concept here.
Yeah, I'm thinking about even practice the practice, and how the podcast tends to be something anyone that purchases from us says, I started with the podcast, or I found a blog post and then it pointed me to the podcast. So the podcast definitely is our biggest driver of building trust. And then thinking about our membership communities and one-on-one consulting, that's probably the biggest financial drivers within it, with our consultants, with our membership communities. So then through that lens, tell me if I'm wrong, it would be, we want to evaluate anything that doesn't point to the podcast or point to our membership communities. We would want to question, like, why are we doing that? How do we cut it? How do we refine it? Have it point to those things that are already working? Would that be, with my business, where you would say we'd want to spend our time?
Yeah, I think you're right on. And with the incredibly limited resources that you have, uh, where do we spend our time to do the right work at the right time in the right order, so we're creating the most value? And every company, by the way, has super limited resources. Until he passed, a good friend of mine was Jack Welch, the guy that ran General Electric, and he was voted manager of the century. The guy was just incredible. He became an amazing friend. Even with a company valued at over $400 billion back in the day, and when he was at his height, he didn't have anywhere close to the resources he wanted. So it's something that impacts all of us. And then the highest level sort of leadership value creation work that we can do is organizing what we do have in the most effective way to create as much value as possible, for our organization, but also in a win-win way for all of our clients and any contractors that we might use. But, in any community member that we touch, I think it's got to be win-win value creation across the board.
Mm. Please don't DIY your accounting. It's like relying on a self-help book instead of getting much needed therapy. There's a reason accountants go through tons of schooling and grueling exams like we do. You shouldn't be expected to know all the things that they studied for years. They're experts and can make the whole quarterly tax situation smooth, and honestly, with some planning, pretty painless. You don't want to be surprised by taxes or have the IRS breathing down your neck. And therapists ask me all the time where to find an accountant. Herd is my go-to referral for therapists needing bookkeeping, tax preparation, payroll, and all the financial back office stuff. They even help therapists set up a bank account, form a business entity, and open a retirement plan. They work exclusively with therapists and cost way less than the accountant I worked with for years. The deadline to sign up for 2023 tax services with Herd is December 31st, 2023. You can schedule a free consultation at joinherd.com/Joe. That's joinheard.com/Joe, and get your first month totally free with promo code Joe at checkout. Again, that's joinherd.com/Joe. So when a private practice starts to discover that number, what do they do next?
Well, once they do that, what are the primary drivers that have created the most value so far? And then list out. So you have a couple of drivers. It could be the lead generation piece of it. Is it a podcast? Is it trusted relationship based marketing? Is it affiliations with organizations that refer? Whatever that is, what would a 10 state look like? You couldn't think of any better way to optimize this to create value for your practice essentially. So once you create that 10 state, now be super objective around where do you think you're at? Are you a 3? Are you a 7? Are you a 5? And most of the time when we go through these primary drivers for any organization about the things that create 80% plus of the value, we describe the 10 state. It can be pretty robust. And then they come back and say, oh my gosh, we're really only a 2 or a 3. And they've got a nice practice or a nice business as we go through it, because we work with some consulting shops too. And that's great. And so when you look at the 10 state compared to where you're at, that gives you the next steps or actions to take to start leveraging that particular driver even more going in. So you have the number. It's probably just simply net profit, I would guess, about what's left over. And then, okay, what are the 4 drivers? What's the 10 state for each one of those things? And fairly assess yourself today. Are you a 5 across the board? Okay, what actions can you take in the right order and at the right time to march those things towards an 8, a 9, a 10?
Yeah, so I think so a lot of the people listening right now to this series are already either seven-figure practice owners or they wanna get there. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we know that, yes, counseling in a counseling practice, that's how the money comes in. And so, sure, if I wanna make more money, I need to just have more counseling happen. So I need to find that balance between when do we hire new clinicians and onboard them, and when do we do marketing to get more people in there. I think on the surface, that sounds really easy. But then so often we hear from practitioners and owners that say, should I put time into SEO because that's going to help, with the marketing side? Should I be out networking? Should we sponsor this baseball team? Should we give money to this children's museum gala? And then these things that really fall into client acquisition and then serving the client, which is kind of big picture, the very most simple thing that counseling practices do. There's a
Mm-hmm.
million little decisions underneath each of them. The infrastructure of the practice, the user experience coming in, and all the marketing things. How do you
Mm-hmm.
recommend people think through the thousands of choices under those kind of two big categories of a counseling practice?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, just do less better. Like write that down. Do less better. Get a t-shirt. I actually have an ETW t-shirt through my company that says do less better on it. And then really optimize those primary drivers. An example that I think fits here. I've got a recent client that signed up, and he has a very high end um, health and wellness practice. So they have folks that pay $10,000 a year to be part of this, and they probably have 250 clients, and they zoom in on a weekly basis for multiple classes, and they learn about all kinds of things that help on the health and wellness side. And they want to grow it. They'd like to get it to 2 or 3 thousand members. And I started asking questions. Well, what are you doing right now? And they have 2 main marketing events a year that have generated 90+% of their clients. And they're working with consultants around marketing to do smaller events, different events, and SEO and everything else. Well, how's that working? They've been at it a year. Well, the only thing that's really working are big events. So, okay, well, if that's the primary driver, why aren't we doing it 4 times a year? And then
Mm,
putting plans in place to eventually do it once a month. And it seemed like an epiphany, but it seemed so obvious once you look at it. This is the one thing that's really working. Why aren't we doubling down on it? And it's pretty cool to watch what's happening in a pretty short time frame. So we're not wasting time on a bunch of things that haven't proven themselves in a year to really help, but this other thing is really working. Does that make sense, Joe?
yeah, I was just thinking about one of my next level practice members, and they had posted in our membership community. So these are all people that have solo practices.
Mm.
They're maybe ramping up to eventually add another clinician to start a group. But they could be, in a full time job, just starting a side gig counseling practice. They could have full on solo practice. But this individual, we did a special meeting all around getting more clients because a lot of folks weren't hitting the numbers they wanted to hit. And this person said she ran Google ads for a month and she only got 4 clients. And when we broke it down and looked at her lifetime value for her clients was about $2,000 per client. So got 4 clients, so 8 grand in lifetime value. And how much she had spent was $500 to get those 4 clients. And she said, it just didn't feel like it was working. I only got 4 clients. And she had a total of, I think, 6 clients. So, 2/3 of her clients came in through these Google ads. And as we looked at it and said, well, you want to be full, you want to be at 15 to 20 clients. If we just ran $500 a month ads with the same numbers without even tweaking anything, you'd be full within just a handful of months. And that's not even increasing your budget. What if you increased your budget to $1,000 a month? Do you think that you could get better at ads, reduce your overall cost per click and all that? And it was just for her like this amazing light bulb, similar to what you're saying, where
Mhm.
that thing worked. You got most of your clients you currently have from just running some Google ads. You don't need to do an e-newsletter. You don't need to do all this SEO work. You don't have to be on every social media. Let's just start with getting you full the way that we know is working. And it was really freeing for her to just let go of a lot of those other things.
Mm. And what a great ROI that you just mentioned there. $8,000 in lifetime value for a $500 investment over a month.
Yeah.
Oh
Well,
my
and
God.
I think that's one thing that, because most of us didn't go to business grad school, we went to do clinical work. Just that idea of lifetime value or running those numbers or ROI is so new to so many listeners,
Yeah.
that when they start to learn those things, it's like, yeah, you're trading nickels for quarters. Like, do that all day long. If you could do that and have it be guaranteed, wouldn't you see how much money you could put into the nickels to get quarters back?
Yeah, for sure. And another way I think about this is I've learned not to believe in a cookie cutter approach to any of the leadership or business maxims out there. That this is the way it works and this is what you do. When it comes to marketing, well, you have SEO and you have all these other things in your brand. And so people start doing things because they think they're supposed to, instead of saying, well, what's worked so far and how do we do that better? And what does my practice or what does my business need right now to take the next step in creating more value and increasing the value of the practice or organization? That's where it should be, because most of the MBAs coming out, they're theoretical. They're talking about stuff, but they're not very good at the practical application of it to create the most value within an organization. So I wouldn't buy into this is what you're supposed to do. Analyze what's been working and then do that even better, and it'll be incredible what you discover over time.
Hmm. Lee, one of the big things that, as I've interviewed 7-figure practices and as people have applied for 7-figure practice club, kind of one of the big questions slash, I don't even want to say pain points, is a lot of these individuals, they were trained as a social worker. They were told you might make 60 to $100,000 a year if you're lucky, and
Mm.
then they've kind of accidentally just put one foot in front of the other, keep adding clinicians, and then get some business training as they realize, oh, this thing's taken off, and next thing you know, they've got this 7-figure practice, and it's just more money and free time than they ever dreamt they would have. And
Mm.
I know a lot of our listeners aren't there. A lot of people are hustling, they're bootstrapping it. You could only dream of having that problem. But Lee, as someone who has exited so many companies at such a high level, I imagine that the work you now do is out of the choice to work, not out of the necessity to work to provide for your family.
This is a
So,
gym for my brain. Yes, I love
yeah,
it. I love
right. So knowing that it's no longer kind of feeding your family, having your life goals, financially, whatever, like what motivates you? How do you stay grounded? How do you find meaning in life knowing that you've succeeded in a lot of ways that the world would say, Lee, you should be sitting on a beach somewhere. Like why are you doing anything? Like for you, how do you continue to find meaning, excitement, curiosity in your life?
Well, sitting on a beach, well, I'd be in the water scuba diving, and then
Ooh, me too.
I would have a scuba diving practice, business, and then I would have a little bar. I mean, I wouldn't stop. But what does it for me? I actually just started listening to your book and kind of going through that in terms of the
Mm,
Thursday's a new Friday, and I I work a lot. I work as many hours right now as I did in some of the most grueling startups that I had that turned out really well. I love it. It's to me, it's like one giant blended life. I do what I want to do. I make time, appropriately for all the things that are important to me. But my whole purpose for being here is perpetuating this whole concept of value creation. I want to create, organizations that are connecting culture to value creation and impact tens of millions of employees someday. And I want to do the same thing in families. and really get it out there. And this really is why I'm here. And and when you think about holistic value creation, because usually, within organizations, it seems to all be about the money. And even those that virtue signal like crazy, saying they're doing the right stuff, when you look under the covers, are leaders in this country these days. It's all about the money. And I look at it and I say, well, money and wealth and power, with virtue, creates value in the world at scale, and wealth and power or influence practice without virtue takes value out of the world at scale. And so this is why I do it. It's incredibly important. And I said before our podcast started that if we fix the kids, we fix the world. And even though I do like dystopian future sci-fi type movies, I'm a big fan of that. I don't want to live in it. And I want it to be an amazing world for me to age out in, because we're creating a whole new generation of value creators. And I would like to make that the culture in this country. And then let's infect all the other countries around the world. We're not even creating in the United States, for example, 10%, I think, of the value that we could. And it's an exciting opportunity, and I'll continue to be a happy warrior and fighting for it. But that gets me going every single day, and I love it.
Lee, what do you do when you get into something and then realize maybe you've taken on a commitment that you don't want to do? It's not bringing you joy. It doesn't feel like it's as fulfilling. How do you exit, cut out, remove that gracefully? What does that process look like for you?
Yeah, more importantly, don't say yes. So learning to say
Right, right.
no. And I just keep going with that mantra, do less better. I get opportunities thrown at me virtually daily that are really solid. Like if I had nothing else going on or had capacity, I would probably get involved with it. But when I look at everything that I'm doing, and I look at, hey, what are the things I do that create the most value for myself and my clients, family, friends, communities that I engage with, what are those things? And everything else I just start peeling off. And I don't want to leave anybody high and dry, but I just start I get off a board, I get disinvolved, with an organization. And you can do that and keep it in balance. But that mantra of do less better, that is so freeing for me. And as I keep, taking this out to more and more leaders that I work with, and I've worked with thousands of them, it's freeing for them too.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, if nothing else from this podcast, a combination of do less better and make every action and every decision through the lens of what will create the most value for your practice.
So awesome. If people want to connect with you, also, I know you have a new podcast coming out soon. Would love to send a bunch of people to that podcast. Tell us more about how to connect with you, how to follow your work, how to learn from you.
Yeah, the best way to connect with me, go to the website, which is etw.com, and you can learn about what we're doing. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got quite a few folks over there.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much for being on the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you, Joe.
Well, as you are growing your seven-figure practice or running it, we are here to support you. That's why we're doing this series, getting a ton of amazing thoughts, ideas, ways that people think through things during this series. Things that we covered, if you haven't hit on them, we talked about how to position yourself now if you're not a seven-figure practice. We've talked about building your leadership team. We talked about a practice that isn't specializing and how they've grown. We've talked about how to know when to expand, how to make early decisions now before you're a seven-figure practice that will really expand later. In the bonus episode from December 15th, hiring 10 people in 1 month. And then last episode, we talked about launching a teaching practice with interns and practicum students. So if you have missed any of those, we have a solid series going on here. Also, if you are a seven-figure practice, don't forget that those applications for the Seven-Figure Practice Club close on January 31st, 2024. So you can apply for that over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. really at this phase, it's about being around other people that are doing things similar to you. So being with other seven-figure practice owners. So once a month, we're going to have our hot seat 90-minute session where we're going to have 3 25-minute hot seats where we all give you feedback, ideas. You come with a presenting issue, question, direction. You may even just be like, I don't even know where to spend my time. And other seven-figure practices and myself will be helping you sort through that, how we would think through it. And then once a month, we're going to be having one of our seven-figure practice club members do a 60-minute presentation on something they are just knocking out of the park that they feel like is really their expertise. It's a great way to practice those consulting skills, to get feedback from other people that are playing at your level, to say, I liked this, I wish you would have dug into this a little bit more, to get some of that Q&A practice so that you can really launch beyond your seven-figure practice while also providing amazing content for those that are in the seven-figure practice club. Then we're meeting up twice a year for 2 days. The first one's going to be here in Traverse City, Michigan. And then the second one, we have yet to determine where that's going to be. So it's going to be an amazing group of people. You can apply over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. Also, we could not do this show without our amazing sponsors. Doing your own accounting, kind of DIYing it, that is a terrible idea. Accountants go through so much schooling, grueling exams, just like we do as therapists. We get board certified. We go through grad school. We don't just send people to a self-help book and say that's good enough if you have all this trauma and need EMDR or other things. In the same way, you really need to have people behind the scenes that do tax prep. And that's what's amazing about Herd is Herd exclusively works with therapists in a way that is so much cheaper than the average accountant. The deadline to sign up for 2023 tax services to have them do your taxes for this year is December 31st. So please, please, please make sure you sign up as soon as possible. Get one of those consultations with them totally for free over at joinherd.com/Joe. You're going to get your first month for free for all the bookkeeping, accounting, all of that if you use promo code Joe at checkout. Thanks so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.